to today's live chat from Poland, from Wrocław, Poland, or just south of Wrocław, Poland. And in this video, I'm going to be discussing some of the things rather similar to what I discussed yesterday. And before I say anything else, I must about yesterday. Sorry, I realized there were technical problems due to the internet connection, I think. And so hopefully this will be better. This is a live broadcast, so you can actually ask anything you want, whether or not it's related to the subject or not, history related. Or anything else, I suppose. Please, though, do keep the language clean because in a case like this, where I'm speaking from my mobile phone, then I have to ban the person immediately. So with that in mind, though, so please don't say anything, even as a joke, which is anyway rude. So as you can see, I'm out in the countryside. I'm staying at a place called Szczeknica, which is to the southeast of Wrocław, formerly Breslau. Here to my right, we have the floodplain of the Oder River, and I did a video 5 weeks ago on the poisoning of the Oder River, which was a live broadcast. No, sorry, it wasn't live. It was, and the reason for the poisoning is still not known. In this course of this video, you won't be seeing the Oder River because it's about 3 kilometers in that direction, more or less. But that's a floodplain, and in 1997 there was a major flood here in July 97, and since then a lot of work has been done to repair the damage. If I turn the camera over the other side, there is the town of Szczeknica, which is a dormitory, if you like, of Wrocław. So building can be done on this side, but no planning permission would be granted for buildings on the other side of the dike I am walking on right now. So I shall be staying here for a few days, but I shall be going back to Ukraine sometime next month. Now, one thing that we have seen in the last couple of days is the situation with the mobilization in Russia, which I sort of discussed yesterday, and more details have since come out. Well, maybe they were known yesterday, but they weren't known to me. So Putin wants to find 300,000 men from somewhere, and so 300,000 people in Russia are likely to be getting their orders to report for military duty, or we've also heard reports of the military just turning up and collecting them, and then these people will have to go off and fight in Ukraine. So the first thing that stands out about not only what's happened so far, but from reports that I've seen, is that these people are largely those of ethnic minorities. They are not ethnic Russians. So if you live in Siberia, for example, then you are at far greater risk than if you live in Moscow. It's rather strange in some ways, because Moscow and Petersburg is probably where the greatest opposition to the dictatorship is. But anyway, that's the way they've done it. Maybe they don't want to see too many funerals in Moscow. Another thing which has come out, which I didn't know about yesterday, is the exemptions. And well, maybe if I'd read the whole report properly, I would have seen it. It seems that obviously it's not just people who are Russian, who seem to be ethnically Russian, I should say, who are protected, but it's also those people who are work in some way for the administration. So anybody who works in the regime's organs of repression, such as the police or the secret police, they're automatically excluded. So that's pretty good news for those who want to join such organizations because it means they say they can beat up protesters and not go to the war. After all, it's much more fun beating up an unarmed lady than it is having to fight an armed Ukrainian. So that's the way that the regime sees things. Not only that, those who are studying will get deferment. That's great news for the wealthy. Those who can afford to go off and study. Certainly reminds me of the situation that existed in the United States during the Vietnam War. 17% of the people there were black, when the black population was something like half of that as the overall, and certainly those who got injured or killed was massively overrepresented by black people. In my experience in Ukraine so far, of course, that people in the occupied areas didn't have a great deal to discuss with the occupiers from their facial characteristics, more or less where they came from, and they were not Russians. They were largely Siberians anyway. I can tell by the way they look and to a certain extent speak. So it seems to me, to a large extent, and I mean this is now subjective, highly subjective, but those responsible for crimes in places such as Bucha, in Irpin, Borodyanka, were from Siberia. It seems. I mean, I can't, when people are the victims of crime, they're not really spending a great deal of time looking at the faces of the criminals that are doing it. But it just appears to be that way. So yesterday I also mentioned about Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman. Somebody spoofed his son, whether or not it was really him or somebody else, that we don't know, but pretending that his call-up papers had arrived, and it turned out that this Dmitry, his son, well, he's a member of the establishment elite. He's not going to risk his life in order to make Putin richer. The people who need to do that are the poor people, not those who belong to the establishment. So Putin was very careful to get members of his own family out of the country, and so out of harm's way. And this, unfortunately, is what we're seeing now. Those who are going off there to Ukraine are the poor. Those who are suffering in Ukraine are the poor. Hello, Carlos. Colin, sorry. Morning all, thank you. Hello. And so for me, hello. He's wow, you're up late. Wow. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, Japan. And so this is hello, and so this is the how I see this developing. It's really, it doesn't matter as long as the people, or 7 p.m. Sorry, I got that wrong. Okay, I calculated the wrong way. It seems to me as though the people who are dying, or meant to die, are the poor, because at the end of the day they can't, they cannot allow the rich to do it. Now, another thing. Hello from Romania in Londonderry, County Durham, Londonderry, I should say, and this war is one, I believe, of trying to protect Putin's power base. To my way of thinking, what happened in Kazakhstan earlier this year, where the dictatorship there was almost, or came close to being, I don't know if that's fair, but there were massive protests against it, which in the end were put down thanks to the use of Russian forces. What Putin cannot have on his border is a democracy to which other countries other people in Russia will look and say, how come it's so bad for us and so good for them? How come Russia has got so much of the world's resources, yet at the same time the people who live there in abject poverty. We wouldn't have seen the massive amount of theft that has occurred in Russia, in Ukraine, in occupied areas, if there was better standard of living in Russia. One very clear thing that we can see between Nazi Germany and its war of aggression and the current war is that the Nazi German economy was absolutely bankrupt in 1939. Improvements in its certain standards of living only came about as a result of the use of slave labor or near slave labor in occupied territories and the theft from those territories. Of course, the standard of living, that was only a temporary thing, because by 1942, summer 42, the bombing and the disruption got so great that it disrupted any improvements in the standard of living. What we see here is with these land grabs is a way of allowing Putin to give the resources of southern or eastern Ukraine to his mates. Now, I agree that Ukraine is a highly corrupt society, but to a large extent that is due to the influence from the Kremlin and the post-communist situation that's existed there. So for anybody to use that as an excuse for not to assist, that's a bad reason. And amongst Ukrainians, there's a huge amount of support. Morale is very high, even in places which have been almost completely destroyed. Now, when I'm walking around these places and talking to people, then it's a case of thank you for the support, and we're going to win. And these are people often their homes have been completely destroyed. And so this is something I really have to make very clear. I really feel, though, for these Russian people who are now being mobilized, the best and only solution is for the regime to be overthrown. If the Russian people can do something, take to the streets to save their lives, because at the moment they're being threatened with maybe 10, 15 years imprisonment, and in a Russian prison it's not going to be very pleasant of that, I'm certain. But at the end of the day, it's better than getting killed. Getting killed for what? Or getting maimed for what? Putin's not going to be around forever. It's his 70th birthday next month, 2 weeks' time, and one must question what the point is now. Another thing, again, I touched on yesterday, was on nuclear weapons, but I don't believe that is. Why would the wealth of Russia has been looted and is now largely in other countries? It's in the United Kingdom, offshore places, Cayman Islands, Gibraltar, some other, Singapore, United States, Switzerland. They're not going to attack their own sources of wealth. On the other hand, they may try a demonstration of a nuclear weapon. I do appreciate that there is this risk. They might try an airburst over the Black Sea or something like that, or which is unlikely. Well, for which there may be no immediate victims. They may try doing something like even an underground test inside Russia itself, for which there can be, with the point of which would be to give fear, but not to actually do it. For those who asked this question, is it... Sorry, the internet went off. I don't know why. I've spoken to many people who've lost their homes, and the people whose own relatives were buried alive, and then assistance was denied at gunpoint. I've spoken to people in that situation. The people who were buried alive by those Grad rockets or whatever they were, artillery, and they are just as dead as if they've been killed by a nuclear weapon. There's no, as far as they're concerned, there's no difference. And so what I would argue, therefore, is that those who are fearing nuclear attack, Putin won't stop at Ukraine. Hitler didn't stop. He would have gone on and on and on. Let's remember that Hitler was allowed to march into the Rhineland in 1935. He was allowed to start rearmament, although it was forbidden by the terms of the Versailles Treaty. He was allowed to occupy Austria and then parts of Czechoslovakia, then effectively all of Czechoslovakia. Slovakia was nominally independent, but it was a puppet state. He was allowed to take a land grab in Lithuania, and nobody did anything. And it was only when it attacked Poland that something was done, but by then it was too late. Nazi Germany, with its ally, the Soviet Union, attacked Poland together, or 1st of September and the 17th of September 1939, and the result was the Second World War. We had tens of millions of deaths. We had ethnic murder on a state which has never happened before. We had the Holocaust, and all of this was through giving in to a Nazi dictator and letting him take what he wanted. Putin has behaved in a similar manner. Now, I appreciate that Putin isn't maybe as racist as Hitler was, but certainly what we can see with these things, such as these false referenda and what have you, is that whereas in the Ukrainian-speaking population, or the Russian-speaking population, consider themselves Ukrainian, have all fled. The Crimean Tatars, who for years had been oppressed by the Kremlin, including the mass deportations which took place in the 1940s. This is the historical relevance of what is happening today in Ukraine. So therefore, personally, I believe that he wouldn't stop there. The object was to occupy all of Ukraine. Let's suppose he got away with it. Then what would he have done? If he's trying to rebuild ancient empires, or not so ancient empires, what's to stop him? Where I am now standing was part of the Soviet Empire only 35 years ago. And it's now Poland's now a member of NATO. Is this land to be given back to him because of some weird imperialist dream that I don't know? So anyway, so that's how I see it. So if anybody sees it in any different light, do please make some comments below. The next video will be regular one, will be on Friday, and that is about a arms factory. It's the largest arms factory, so the second largest arms factory the Third Reich had, which is called DAG Bromberka, now in Bydgoszcz, Poland, and starts on Friday. But I shall try and do some other live broadcasts related to news, probably coming from this very attractive dike here in southeast of Wrocław. But for the moment, thanks for being here, and all the best from me in Poland.